You think you know why you made that decision, but what if the anger someone felt because of it was actually the clearest proof that you were right? This is what nobody tells you about Scorpio. It's not the intensity, it's not the silence, it's what happens inside you when someone you love looks at your choice and reacts with anger. That specific moment when you should back down, should give in, should adjust your decision to what the other person expected. And you didn't back down. Most people think Scorpio is waterproof at that moment, that the wall automatically rises, and that's it. But it's not like that. Scorpio feels everything. What changes is what Scorpio does with what it feels. And there's something happening in that space between feeling and responding that goes far beyond any argument. There's a question that the other person's anger ignites within you. A question about your right to be who you are, about the real price of truly existing. In this video, we're going to tackle this question head-on. We'll talk about what other people's anger reveals about the bonds you've built, about the psychological mechanism that makes Scorpios realize what the angry person hasn't yet realized about themselves, and about what happens when you choose from such a deep place that the opinions of others simply don't reach you. By the end of this video, something about you will make sense in a way it never has before. Not about astrology, about you. Because there's a pattern that repeats itself in the life of almost every Scorpio. At some point, probably more than once, you made a decision that was right for you, and someone reacted as if you had done something against them. As if your autonomy were an act of rebellion. As if your personal choice were, in some way, an abandonment. And that remains. Not as regret, as a question. Did I need to have done things differently? Could I have protected both sides at the same time? The answer no one gives you is no, not always. And that there's something very specific happening when someone gets angry at your choice that goes far beyond simple disagreement. There's a psychological mechanism at play, a pattern that Scorpio, being Scorpio, perceives faster than the angry person themselves. But perceiving it isn't the same as knowing what to do about it. And it's precisely there, in that tense space between perceiving and acting, that something needs to be named. And it is precisely there, in that space between perceiving and acting, that the most real tension a Scorpio faces resides when someone gets angry because of their choice. It's not the other person's anger that paralyzes you. It's the question that the other person's anger ignites within you. The question of how far your right to be who you are goes without hurting someone you love. This question doesn't have an easy answer. It circulates, it descends, it returns. Because Scorpio doesn't abandon what it hasn't yet fully understood. And this question reveals something much bigger than the episode that generated it. It speaks to an older conflict that Scorpio carries, to exist fully in a world that doesn't always know how to accept those who exist in this way. This question doesn't have an easy answer, and you've probably stayed up more than once trying to solve it in your own head without getting anywhere. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It's not a book that tells you what to do when someone gets angry about your choice. It's something deeper than that. It's material that works with the internal structure of Scorpio, with that unique ability you have to feel the pain of others as information, to map connections, to perceive patterns that others simply don't see. And it shows you how to use all of this without getting lost in the process. How to make decisions that are genuinely yours, without carrying the weight of those who got angry along the way. You are now in that specific state where the question is still active, where the discomfort of having someone angry because of you still occupies space within you. This is the exact moment not to let this reflection cool down. When the wound is open is when the healing has the most strength. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, when someone gets angry about a choice you make, are you able to maintain your certainty, or does the other person's anger end up making you question what you knew was right? The script continues, because the question that remains unanswered isn't about the anger of the person who got angry. It's about what that anger activates within you. There's a structure that Scorpio carries that most people will never understand from the outside. A kind of internal chamber where everything that enters is processed in silence before any response appears. Other people think this silence is coldness, that it's detachment, that Scorpio simply doesn't care enough to react immediately. But what's happening there is the opposite. It's such intense processing that any immediate response would be insufficient. It would be too superficial for what is being felt. And when someone gets angry about your choice, that internal chamber goes into full operation. You start revisiting the choice you made, not to regret it, to understand it, to be sure once again that what you did came from the right place. And then something curious happens. The more you review it, the clearer it becomes. The certainty doesn't disappear. It deepens, as if the other person's anger were, paradoxically, a form of confirmation. This has to do with the internal validation mechanisms that people with high emotional intelligence develop over time. And Scorpio develops these mechanisms early, sometimes too early, because they learned, usually in childhood, that other people's reactions to their choices weren't about them. They were about what others needed them to be. Imagine a simple scenario. You decide to stop something that wasn't working. A job, a relationship, a habit, a dynamic with a family member, and someone close to you reacts with anger, not concern, anger. That specific kind of anger that reveals the person was counting on you continuing in what you decided to leave behind. Counting on you in a way that was never verbalized, never negotiated, never agreed upon. But that existed as a silent expectation that you just broke. What most people do in this situation is retreat, or defend themselves with equivalent energy. Scorpio does something different. Scorpio observes, with that cold, total observation that seems distant on the outside, but is absolutely present on the inside. You're reading the entire situation as it unfolds. You're seeing what the other person's anger is revealing about them, about the bond you had, and about what that bond was, in fact, built upon. And what Scorpio often discovers in this silent reading is unsettling in a very particular way, because what emerges isn't the portrait of a bad person. It's the portrait of someone who was so used to their constant presence, to their deep devotion, to the fact that when Scorpio loves, they do so in a way that occupies a lot of space, that the absence of this devotion in the way they were accustomed to feels like a loss that this person doesn't know how to name. And when we don't know how to name a loss, we express it as anger. What Scorpio discovers in this process is that many of the bonds they carry were built on a version of themselves that was never completely who they truly were. When you change, when you choose from the inside out, that old version begins to crack. The anger of those who are angry is often the sound of that crack. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose comes in here, at this moment when you need to understand what to preserve and what to let crack. The book works with Scorpio's attachment patterns, how you connect, protect yourself, and, when necessary, break free without destroying yourself. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But there's a deeper layer to this story, one that most content about Scorpio never touches on because it demands honesty about something that isn't easy to admit. Sometimes Scorpio knows, before making the choice, that someone will get angry, and you do it anyway, Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. There's a moment in every Scorpio's evolution when standing still to avoid conflict becomes more destructive than the conflict itself. When postponing a true choice to preserve the peace of an environment that shouldn't exist anymore becomes a kind of betrayal, not to the other person, to yourself. And then comes the disturbing part, the part that Scorpio feels but rarely verbalizes. When you made that choice knowing it would generate anger, and the anger came exactly as you predicted, there's a confirmation there. A confirmation that you were seeing the situation clearly, that your internal map was right, and along with that confirmation comes a silent sadness. Because seeing clearly isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes what you see is that a person you love needed a version of yourself that you could no longer be without deeply betraying yourself. This is not failure, it's evolution. But Scorpio feels both at the same time, and this overlapping of feelings is one of the truest and least discussed hallmarks of the experience of being this sign. There is an archetype that appears repeatedly in mythology linked to Scorpio, the figure that descends. This goes to places that others cannot endure. It confronts what lies in the depths, not because it is insensitive to pain, but because it understands that certain truths only exist down there, that certain insights only arrive after a dive that no one on the outside can follow. And when you make a true decision, you're doing exactly that, going down, going to a place within yourself where the opinion of others, however beloved the person may be, simply doesn't reach. Because down there lies a truth that is only yours. That doesn't need external validation to exist, and that paradoxically is exactly the place Scorpio visits when it needs to choose. The anger of those who stayed on top, watching you fall, is real. It's human, but it's not about you. It's about the fear that person has of the depth you demonstrate you're capable of enduring, and that fear, disguised as anger, will continue to surface as long as you keep making choices that come from the bottom. This isn't punishment. It's the inevitable price of being who you truly are. There's something that sets Scorpio apart from virtually every other sign. Its ability to descend and still return. And it's not insensitivity. It's an inner grounding that few develop with the same instinct as you. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose works on this grounding. How Scorpio can use the depth it carries not only to survive the conflicts generated by its choices, but to build from them something that truly lasts. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Now let's talk about the central paradox of this situation. The one that Scorpio carries, but that rarely comes up in conversations about the sign. You are capable of an absurd level of loyalty, a level of commitment to those you love that few signs come close to. And precisely for that reason, when you make a decision that goes against what someone expected of you, the reaction is more intense. Because the expectation was higher, because the trust that person placed in you created a dependence that when your choice arrived revealed how much it was built on a foundation that wasn't as solid as it seemed. This is important to understand. The anger someone feels about your choice is often not proportionally related to the magnitude of the choice. It's proportionally related to how much that person had built around your predictability, how much their life depended on you continuing to be who you were. And when Scorpio changes, when Scorpio chooses from a place of truth, the system that was built around your constancy begins to tremble. Not because you were wrong, but because the other person built on sand. And the evolving Scorpio learns to distinguish between these two cases. To distinguish when the other person's anger is a legitimate sign that their choice was hasty, or a sign that the person simply wasn't ready to see them for who they truly are. This distinction is one of the most important that Scorpio can develop, because without it, You will spend years adjusting your choices to the emotional thermometer of others. And this, for a sign whose mission is transformation, is one of the slowest ways to fade away from within. There's an image that comes to mind when I think of that Scorpio who has already learned this distinction. It's the image of someone who looks at the other's anger without retreating or attacking, who keeps their eyes open while the storm passes, who knows that on the other side of that anger, when it dissolves, there will be a clearer field between the two of you. Or there will be the clarity that that bond wasn't capable of supporting the truth of who you are. And in both situations, you come away knowing more than you did before. More about the person, more about the bond, more about yourself. And this knowledge, even when it hurts, has a value that no artificial peace manufactured by ignoring your real choices could buy. There's still something that needs to be said about what happens after the anger, after the noise passes, because Scorpio isn't just left with the clarity the situation generated, it's left with something quieter and more lasting. It's left with the memory of having remained whole while everything around them shook. And this memory, over time, becomes a kind of internal anchor, a reference point you'll access the next time a genuine choice generates resistance, not as arrogance, as recognition. I've been here before, I've survived this before, and what I chose remained mine after the storm passed. This is how Scorpio builds self-confidence, not through easy victories, but through choices that cost something, that generated real discomfort, that put something you loved at risk, and that even so you kept, because deep down you were certain that this was it. And Scorpio, when it feels this certainty deep down, cannot ignore it. It has tried. It doesn't work. This ability to see beyond anger, to await clarity without closing oneself off or giving in, is one of Scorpio's most mature expressions. It doesn't arise from nothing. It is cultivated through difficult choices that have taught them the difference between yielding out of love and yielding out of fear of losing approval. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose provides the roadmap for this cultivation, a tool for Scorpios to develop the discernment that separates true choice from choice, tainted by fear of others' reactions. Not as an abstraction, but as something concrete that changes how you decide. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. And so we come to the final part of this conversation, the part that you've probably somehow felt coming from the beginning. The anger someone feels towards your choice is one of the most brutal and honest proofs that you are, in fact, doing something that is truly yours, because choices that belong to others don't generate this kind of reaction. Choices made to please, to maintain, to preserve a status quo that no longer serves you, those pass in silence. A silence that seems like peace, but which, for Scorpio, is a kind of emptiness that accumulates until there's nowhere left to put it. The anger that arises when you truly make a choice is loud. It's uncomfortable, it's frightening at times, but it's an anger that carries within it the confirmation of something Scorpio needs to hear from time to time. That you exist, that your presence in the world of choices has weight, that you are not transparent, not irrelevant, not merely an extension of what others need you to be. You are a Scorpio. And true choices have real consequences, bonds that tremble, people who get angry, and sometimes silences that hurt more than any argument. But at the end of this process, on the other side of all this turbulence, there is something that few signs truly get to know. A version of you that wasn't shaped by what others expected, that wasn't built on the need to be approved. A version of you that you chose. And that, despite everything, is still standing. This isn't cruelty, it isn't selfishness, it isn't the difficult Scorpio that people often describe when they want to simplify who you are. It's the rarest and most valuable thing in life. It's authenticity with roots deep enough to withstand the wind of those who are angry outside. Be mindful of your choices. They are the clearest proof of who you truly are.